Hi, and welcome to Women of Worth Wednesday. I'm GANEL-LYN, your host and producer of this amazing show. We're so happy today to be with you from snowy Utah, very cold, snowy. This is Shelaine Maxfield. For those of you that are familiar with my favorite lipstick.
Sentimental.
My favorite lipstick that I get asked by millions of people all the time when I wear it. It is produced right here at the point of the mountain, right? Pretty much?
Yes. This is headquarters. It's probably produced in one of 5 places in the U.S.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So we're coming to you today from the Younique Foundation building in Lehi, Utah, right at the point of the mountain. It's hard to miss if you're on the freeway. You can usually
know what you're looking for.
And I feel like this conversation has been a long time coming. When was it? Springtime of last year that I came to the luncheon?
That sounds right.
Yeah, and I hope that there are new people watching today that have not heard the story of your why and why this makeup company came to be. But if anyone is joining us that wants to comment where you're watching from, and if you're familiar with the Younique Foundation, the Younique company, and with the story of the Maxfields and how they came to be, then I hope you will share this video because it's a unique opportunity, no pun intended.
All the time. I love it.
A unique opportunity to talk to a faith-based community today. And you don't always have that opportunity to really expand. I know you live very authentically and you talk about your faith, but I'm excited today because we get to talk about some really important messages and your why. So before we kind of dive into the heart of your story and your mission, tell a little bit to our viewers about where you grew up and where you came from and Derek and all of that.
I grew up in a little community, a beautiful little community called Star Valley, Wyoming. And I found that as I tell people that, they either have no idea where it is or they know somebody from there.
And then likely you have to know them too, probably,
yes,
right?
And usually I'll know them too. I've been gone from the valley for about 20 years, so I don't know as many people. But if they were in my age range, I remember them and maybe even still have contact with them.
And maybe someone's related to them, right?
Yes. It's usually like a mission companion.
Yes.
They're like, oh, I had a mission companion.
And that's where you fell in love.
Yeah. I moved to Utah after I graduated from high school, went home for a short time, and then I went to live in Provo because my uncle's mother-in-law had super cheap rent.
I love
in her basement.
It's how all good love stories start, right?
Yeah. So, well, hopefully all of them, right? So I lived there for a short time, and then she decided to stop renting her basement out because her son and daughter-in-law were going to come move in there. So I moved down the street to the closest apartment I could find. Stadium Terrace.
Stadium Terrace. Shout out to all the BYU students.
And Derek had moved into that same apartment complex.
And where did he grow up?
Ward. He grew up in Meridian, Idaho.
Okay, another small area of the world.
Oh, I thought it was a big place.
Well,
I thought he was a city boy because he was from Boise, and that's a city. So yeah, my perceptions changed.
Right? They had a mall.
Yeah, so
back in the day, a Taco Bell and a mall made it big.
Oh yeah,
in my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you fell in love there, and how much do you want to share about Derek's journey of getting hurt and all of that?
Whatever.
How much do you think that played into where you're at today?
I think it had a lot to do with where we are today. So about 5 or 6 months after we got married, he started to get sick. And I was thinking, oh my word, this is my Superman.
This is
like,
your,
he can't get sick.
And this is your supposed to be long honeymoon, the first,
the first year. Yeah. And
one eternal date.
Right.
If we only knew at 16, right?
Right. That's so true. So he started to get sick, and they were doing a bunch of tests on him, and the word cancer started floating around. And we didn't know anything about cancer, and they were doing bone marrow biopsies, and he started having stomach issues, and so they did a scope on his stomach, and they found some what they call blasts on the lining of his stomach, and they took biopsies of that and sent them, I want to say it was like South Carolina or something like that. They had to send him away to be tested, and we can actually track down the time from when he was just sick and he didn't have cancer, and then he did. And he actually found out because a nurse didn't know that he didn't know yet. And she told him, because they upgraded his room, and he said, wow, thanks for the upgrade. She said, oh, people with your type of leukemia always get their own room. And he was like, because they found a parasite when they were scoping his stomach, and that's why he went to the hospital. But the results from South Carolina came back, and pre-cell phone day, he was driving from Boise to Utah. It's a pretty complicated, long story, but yeah, he found out he had cancer.
And he was in the hospital and went through some severe treatments. And in that experience, he made contact with someone.
Greg. His name was Greg Johnston. Greg was about the same age. He had the same type of leukemia, but Greg thought he had the flu for 2 or 3 weeks before he went to the hospital.
And maybe our viewers can relate to how quickly life can change almost in a moment, right?
Yes.
Where you're newlyweds,
cancer spreading through your blood.
Yeah, and then the word cancer.
Yeah. So it just really put our life in the fast lane very quickly, and people would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," and I would say, well, people always said that the first year is the hardest. They're like, that's not what they meant.
That says a lot about who you are and what is coming in the future. God trusted you from day one with some big stuff.
Yes, and I feel really fortunate that the audience is what it is today, because I don't tell a lot of people this, but I had a priesthood blessing when he was getting sick that said I would be okay in the nights alone in the months to come.
Oh. And so you knew it wasn't going to be a 5-minute.
No, and I knew. Oh my gosh, it's
the power of priesthood blessings.
Huge.
I don't know how anyone survives without them.
I know,
right?
That's my testimony is very much anchored in the
power of
reality and the power of the priesthood.
So your husband Derek and Greg become bonded.
Very good friends, because they were the same age. They didn't have much to do besides get chemo, and Derek wanted to spend his time wisely. He had his desktop computer there so he could work, and then he would get to know the other patients in the hospital because he didn't want to just sit there and be
classic
sick.
Him too, right?
Yeah.
And then fast forward to Greg graduates.
Yeah. So Derek finished his treatments, and he came back a month later and for his first checkup, and he went to find Greg to see how he was doing, because everything went wrong for Greg. Everything went right for Derek, but everything went wrong for Greg.
Wow.
And found him there back in the ICU and knelt down by his bed and grabbed his hand and was like, just make it to the 5th floor one more time. Because he had all this guilt that he was going to live. And
that he survived.
And that Greg was dying. And Greg grabbed his hand back and...
You can cry on this show. It happens every time.
I can cry anywhere.
Yeah, me too.
He asked him to promise that he'd live for both of them. They'd talked about it before, but Derek stutters, so he never really thought he could do anything great with his life. So he was always hesitant to make that promise, knowing that he couldn't keep it because he stutters. And that's one of the things about mindsets. It's like when you shift your focus, your life shifts too. But it was when he went back a month after the month that he promised him, because Greg said, you're gonna live. And you've got to live for both of us and do something great with your life. And asked Derek to find his daughter too, because he had to give up a daughter, and that's another story too. But we did find her eventually, and so Derek promised that he would live for both of them and that he'd do something great for his life. But he walked out of the hospital feeling overwhelmed, because he's like, I stutter, I can't even talk. Like, how am I going to do something great with my life?
There's some great scripture stories about stuttering,
right?
Yes. We're just going to have you back, and we'll just keep it. So he goes kind of back to living life until one day he's playing basketball.
Yes.
And
so life goes on.
Like a lot of us, right? We have these desires in our hearts, but we're not sure, which I think is part of your backstory. Yeah. We're not always sure how something on our heart is really going to turn into the next steps. Yeah,
so we just kind of live stagnantly instead of proactively, which it's such a pity that we do that.
Yeah, because God's willing to work with all of us.
Yeah, and he's like,
Yeah,
I got all day.
and
you need to get to work.
He literally says to Enoch and Moses and others that struggled, like, okay, I know you think you have this weakness that's going to inhibit my plan, but
I got you.
And we can work this out.
Yeah, there's nothing you can't do with me.
So he kind of goes back to...
Yeah, he's at work, and they played basketball during lunch.
Was it right here at this facility?
It was downtown by the Spaghetti Bowl downtown.
Okay, perfect.
And he cracked heads with the guy he was guarding, and the other guy was dazed, and they put Derek on the floor, like, pinned his arms down, put him on the floor. He's like, get off of me, what are you doing? They're like, you broke your eye socket. So he had crushed his frontal sinus cavity.
Which is not a pretty injury.
No, it looked like he got hit in the face with a hammer. And they had to take him up to the hospital. The U of U was close where he had his treatments for cancer, and
he's taken to...
Yeah, and his co-worker was like so worried about him because he didn't know. He thought his brain was smashed because he didn't know it was hollow under there. Anyway, another long story short, he had to have surgery from it, and he woke up in Greg's room. Nobody, when Derek was there, came from post-op into the cancer ward when he was there for 4 months. And Derek woke up in Greg's room, so we don't know if a nurse saw his name and they're like, "Oh, we know that guy. We'll take him."
Or Greg.
Yeah, we don't know. But it was divine intervention to be sure.
And that re-centered him.
It did.
And during this time too, I'm familiar with your story. Was your awareness of someone you cared about and her history with abuse happening close to that time, or?
No, it was actually years later.
Years later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, when he woke up from that surgery,
you started your other...
He couldn't remember why he was there. He knew where he was, but he couldn't remember why. And he could hear the nurses, and he could smell the sheets and things like that. And he remembered that he had a daughter, and he's like, I have a daughter now, and I didn't when I was going through chemo. And it was like God spoke to his heart and said, that's connected. Right, Derek. Mm-hmm. You're right back here, and you haven't changed, and you're using the same excuses. And it changed his life. And he promised that he would be different. And he woke up at 4:45 every morning, every weekday morning for a year and a half, and worked on this software that he had always wanted to write. But because he stutters, he didn't feel like he could sell it. And he decided he didn't care. If he stuttered in front of the whole world, he was going to do it. And
I really hope and pray this video goes to the millions of us that feel like our thing is... I call it our calic. We all have a little calic, and we think somehow we can't style our hair around that, right?
Yes. We just have to adjust.
Yeah.
We just have to adjust.
So he became very successful.
He did. He started a software company, and it was when he sold that, and he was transitioning out of that job. He was driving home one day from work, and we were talking about a survivor of sexual abuse. Neither of us remember who she was, or who we were talking about.
You don't remember?
Yeah, because we know tons of them now, but we knew several back then too. But we were talking about somebody that had suffered, and saying how awful it was that she had suffered, and she had carried all this shame and this guilt, and it wasn't even her fault, and it had pretty much disrupted and ruined her life, how she felt about herself, how she saw herself. And Derek just said, that's so unfair. Somebody's got to do something about that. And again, it was like the Spirit just touched his heart and spoke to him and said, yeah, Derek, why don't you do something about that? And that conversation changed our lives, and
turned into...
we wanted to help survivors, and we got some ideas of how to do that, even though, like, who are we? We don't know anything about that. Like, we don't know how to help. We're not clinicians. But we just knew that we had to do something. Your heart.
And maybe our viewers can so relate to this. You have this thing on your heart, and we talked before we went live. It's the moms making peanut butter jelly sandwiches today that are not going to maybe have the same prompting you and Derek eventually had. Yeah. But you have a prompting to text your neighbor today.
Yes, that's how I started.
Right? Or to go and quit something so you have more time to read to your kids. Or to call up someone or start a blog. Like, I think sometimes we get so hooked into the ownership of the results that we don't just do the next thing of what's on our
see
heart.
the barricades instead of the pathways.
So your thought was we should do something.
Yes.
And
so we got this idea for the retreat together. Started. It's completely evolved because we got the right people in place. But
a retreat to serve this demographic.
Yes, adult
women?
survivors, and eventually it'll be men too. But right now it's just women, adult female survivors of childhood sexual abuse, because we call them the forgotten survivor. There's a lot of things for cancer, a lot of organizations for diabetes, but there's not really a lot of people doing anything for survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And from a very personal place, my sister is a very well-known person to the Women of Worth community. She is who took her life. My sister took her life almost 4 years ago at the age of 40. She was also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I will often say it changed fundamentally the spiritual makeup of who she was.
It changed her at her core.
At her core.
Yeah.
And many efforts were made to help her step through that.
Yeah.
But I will say from that moment forward, that changed how she saw herself, her worth, her literal physical spiritual makeup changed. Yeah. And I think that's why the scriptures are so bold about condemnation of hurting children.
Yeah.
Because I think our Heavenly Father is clear. He's in those moments when these children are, and often these children then, thank goodness He's the judge, because then the perpetrators were at one time usually victims themselves. So it can go in so many directions.
Yes.
And I love that your work with the Younique Foundation, specifically the retreat, is a bridge. It helps women stand in the light and be seen as they are. Jordan Smith's my favorite song. It's one of my anthem songs, and I was listening to it on the way over, and I thought, that's the work you do. You're giving permission to survivors to come stand in the light of God, or whatever they want to call creation, right?
Right.
And be seen.
Yes, we're very neutral and all-encompassing about that.
Non-denomination.
I understand that healing comes from the atonement of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And if you can teach people how to heal and help them understand their self-worth, that a lot of them have completely disconnected themselves from, because they don't understand,
from themselves.
They were so traumatized.
Yeah, from themselves.
Yes.
And so as mothers and wives and neighbors and sisters and aunts and whatever, they literally are disconnected inside and not able to really
And it's usually not their fault.
No.
You know, it's really hard to understand. I have self-worth, but somebody's abusing me, and you know what I mean? Like, and it's hard to make that disconnection without completely disconnecting everything, so you don't have to feel it.
And many of the stories of sexual abuse include, maybe they tried to tell someone and they weren't protected. Yes. They tried to tell someone and they weren't believed. They tried to tell someone and the perpetrator was protected instead. And so that shame story just adds it completely complicates the trauma. Right.
It adds to it.
So was the idea to fund the retreat the genesis of why the makeup company started?
So,
which I love.
A lot of people get it backwards. They think that we're paying it forward, but we needed a way to fund helping survivors of sexual abuse heal. And he was retired, and we would have eventually run out of money if he hadn't ever gone back to work.
You could have lived with me.
Oh, thank you. As long as I have friends, I'll never be homeless. Yes. We got all these ideas together, and I'm like, well, that's really nice, but how are we going to pay for that? Because even starting small, it costs us $2,500 to $2,800 US to have a survivor come through our 4-day retreat.
4 days.
It's free to the survivor. They have to pay travel to and from, but the actual retreat is free, which is why donors are so important to us. And Derek and I can pay the 2/3 of the funding, but we have to get 1/3 from the public. And we have a whole
to maintain your status as a philanthropy.
Yes, and we have 1 year left of our ramp up phase, and they're lenient with you, but we've already gotten to that 1/3 public because of our amazing philanthropy team.
So let's be clear before we fast forward too much. I want you guys to understand how many companies do you know have great foundations and causes that
Yeah.
they come up with after they've become this amazing success.
Yeah, which is still great.
Which is great. That's
it was just not the way we did it.
I just love that God is always like, how about we, I think he chronically shows us in the scriptures.
Let me teach you how to do this.
How about we do it in a peculiar way?
Yeah.
You know, the Jaredite boats.
Not after the manner of men.
Not after the manner of men.
Yes.
And I love that you had retired, but you knew that you could only do so much. And then the idea for My Beautiful Lips.
Yes, and we can still only do so much because
Right.
if we have one retreat now, but we want to expand.
Right.
We want to be in
Especially-
other languages, in other countries. We want to get into other communities with our Defend Innocence campaign. It's another organization that is all about the prevention and
So that you're not
teaching parents and caregivers how to reduce the risk of childhood
to see
sexual
the signs,
abuse.
to intervene,
Yes.
to protect, to
Yes.
have boundaries like
Yes,
God does.
intervene and protect.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to tell the time frame of how long Younique, the company, has been in existence.
Okay, hold your breath.
Okay.
I hope everybody's sitting down. Derek's long-term goal was to fund a retreat in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
He announced it at a year and a half later, and by 2.5 years later, we had already had 2 retreats when we did the follow-up. And we know that God accelerated the growth because he wants his children to heal. And he trusted us to make it happen. And we have an army of women and men supporting us and standing behind the scenes that they don't get any credit for the success of the company. But we're so thankful for them, and we couldn't do it without all the people that join us in this cause.
The moms that are selling this makeup too.
Yes, the moms that are buying it too.
Yeah, the moms that are buying it, because I'm not
Yes.
selling it by the way, I'm a user. I'm not a distributor. But I'm going to just say to you that I also know that God trusts the humility of you and Derek, and I have often said to people when they've asked about my journey and my mission, I think God just knows I try to be pliable. And
Yes.
that's scary.
Yes.
And literally, how many times has your company been voted the fastest growing? Is that 2, 3? Where are we at?
I think about 3.
Yeah.
And our growth
Is astronomical.
it was. The next place was like 4,000, and ours was like way higher than
Yeah.
that. And 4,000% growth is tremendous. It's amazing, and ours like shot it out of the water, and we know it's because God blesses.
Consecrates.
Yes.
He does. I think it's that important moment of, I was reading in my scriptures today about Felix's wife in Acts 24:24, and I thought, why is God sending me to this story of this woman that I have never, and I did some research on her. She was a Jew, and she divorced her husband, and she married this leader that could have saved Paul. But she was afraid, and she had this great beauty. At the same age and almost the same kind of story, Esther was called and stood forward in the sight of some fear. Like, it wasn't in the minus of fear. There wasn't like this.
Everything was la-di-da-di and
Right,
peaceful. Oh,
right,
no problem, I'll
right,
do that. It's
right.
scary.
It's scary when God is
Yeah.
saying, for a time such as this, which is what I named this message today, because I think one of the takeaways I hope our viewers have is that God will put it on your heart, and then he asks, as Moses, to step into the water. Then the sea parts.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, he plants the seed, but we're responsible
Right.
to nourish it and make something of it.
What has been your greatest spiritual practice or faith practice to help you when it has gotten hard?
I go to the temple a lot.
I knew that's what she was going
And
to say.
I
I
get
totally fed that question.
a lot of
'Cause I do
priesthood
too.
blessings.
A lot
too.
of priesthood blessings in the temple.
And just, seeking personal revelation. I am not ashamed to say that my testimony is very much anchored in the priesthood
Right.
and in the temple. And I actually set a goal to do 100 endowments this year.
Wow.
I've already
I
done 8.
Oh,
and I'm
you
doing
do?
number 9
'Cause I have
after
a few
this.
names I'm behind on. So
Yeah, that's what motivated. It was like a stack of...
because we do multiple
Yeah.
baptisms, multiple initiatory, multiple sealings, and one endowment. Which
Yes.
I love that God is always about the one, but
Yes. Yes.
yeah. I can see why maybe someday the temples will be open 24 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
You
and
can't
people always
sleep at
ask,
night.
why do you keep announcing new ones along the Wasatch Front? And I say, because we wait at every single one of them. They're busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do. And it's fantastic.
It is
it's the only place
fantastic.
I don't care that I
I
have to
know,
look for a
right?
parking
Because
space.
then we get to sit and be still. So as long as I have you for just a moment more, when you've hit those spots where you've wondered and feared, and you've gone and gotten a priesthood blessing, and you've gone to the temple. Share maybe an experience from one of the retreats, from what fuels your why, because your why is very clear, but it sometimes feels like the starfish, right? That we're just like one.
Yes.
And then with
but
the Me
one
Too,
matters.
right? But then the Me Too movement, we hear hundreds and thousands of abuse victims
and
that
we are
survivors.
reminded of how much work needs to be done. Yeah. But that's okay. We're doing something about it, you know?
So what helps you?
One thing that helped me, and this has come over time, is I have this wrong truths spiel that I give. And
at the retreats?
Yes, and other places. But I think we all have wrong truths. We all have things that are true about us that contribute to who we are, but they also hold us back from becoming who we're intended to be. And it was actually when I was reading the scriptures, and I was thinking about Alma and King Lamoni's father, and like all these people that are mentioned in the scriptures, and I started to wonder if they had any idea how meaningful their lives were, and how important what they were doing would be for nations and kindreds and tongues and generations after them.
Did they have any idea?
Yeah. Did how could they possibly have known? And maybe some of them through the Spirit did. But I think others of them were simply obeying. They were doing the small and simple things that they were asked to do, and it brought great things to pass. And I started to wonder, what if God has work for me to do? What if I made promises in the premortal life that I'm not keeping because I don't have a college degree, or because I grew up poor, or
Star Valley, Wyoming,
like all these things that they were true about me, but they weren't the right things to be focusing on. That's what I think
we saw that.
Have.
You're saying that they're the truths that we see as limitations
instead of focusing on like how what are my strengths, what are the things that are right with me. And I would always get so embarrassed when I would cry when I spoke in church, and then one day I was complaining to a friend. I'm like, oh, I have to speak in church. I know I'm gonna cry, and it's so embarrassing. And she just looked me right in the eyes and she said, Shelaine, tears are a gift. And I had never thought of that before. I had always thought of that as a weakness. And what she said changed my perspective. And I think when we change our perspective about our lives and our circumstances and our capabilities, it changes our life. Because who obviously would have us thinking about all the things that are wrong with us? All of our incapabilities and all our disqualifications, like that is obviously the work of the adversary.
Who's, by the way, the captain of all lives.
Yes,
the president of the Liars Club.
Yes, he's clever enough to mix in truth.
He doesn't. And he doesn't hand us a lie and go, by the way, this is a lie. It does feel true at some level, or else we wouldn't partake of it.
He connects it to truth, or else it wouldn't.
Which
wouldn't bother us.
Side note, I'm sure you have had this reflected back at you. You just mentioned not having a college degree and growing up with limited resources. And I would say you and I have similar friends. We get invited to functions where...
we keep good company.
We do. Where people have built large buildings with their name on it because they have so much money. And sometimes I find myself thinking, what am I doing? What am I standing here for? Why did I get... I think I said that when I came into the... Why am I here today? I'm not really
How
sure.
How did I get invited to this?
But one of the things I have heard said about you, and I will attest to it, is one of your strengths comes from those two qualifications. Your humility and your willingness, I think, comes genuinely from a place of you're not throwing some degree in someone's face, and you're not saying, I grew up in this castle. And I think that passion with the humility is what has fueled the spirit that you feel in this company. And that I know from people that have attended your retreats, they have come home changed. And they're beautiful women that I love, and I've watched from afar as they've posted on social media. They've shared their Japanese pottery with the gold cracks. Yes, which is one of the things I teach as well, that I think that atonement is that gold, right? That testifies of Christ, and that it is in our scars and our wounds, just like the Savior shared, right? That we can testify of His power. He didn't hide His scars. He shared them.
Yes.
Yeah. And so thank you for being an example to me and to so many, that the small, simple, weak, and meek can do the great. That is, I think, you're
Those
a fulfillment
are the-
of those scriptures, that it's the meek and the mild that will stand great in the last days. So
those are the people God is using, and I feel like He's sending His cycle breakers to the earth right now.
He is. Because oftentimes we get discouraged when the news consistently reports of trauma,
Negativity,
and war,
crime,
and,
all of it. Yeah.
and the statistics go high, but I often say in the last days, the darkness that will flood the earth will also be overcome by the greater amount of light that will flood. And thank you for being a light bearer and sharing your light.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for those of you that have joined us today and join us every week on Women of Worth. I'm so grateful for knowing your story and being able to share your story. And where can people go to help contribute and donate so that other survivors can attend your retreats?
So if they go to youniquefoundation.org, and it's spelled YOUNIQUE foundation.org, they can contribute there.
And I will link it when this video is over. It wasn't allowing us to do it before, but I'll link the link so that we can be one little donation, right?
They all matter to us.
They all matter.
They all matter.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants resources on how to protect your children and reduce the risk of childhood sexual abuse,
Is the link on that site as well?
I think it probably is, but just go to defendinnocence.org.
Okay.
And you can find both of our organizations on Facebook.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
being
Thank
one of
you.
my favorite people. And I love when I get to talk to my favorite people on this show. And I'm grateful for the community that is here. And you all do such a great job after the show, sharing these videos. Within a week, they reach all over the world and thousands. But today especially, please share with a woman of worth or a man of worth in your life that is home thinking that their learning disability, their past, their struggle, their mistruths are going to stop them from helping build the kingdom of God. And also for any of you that know, we all do, unfortunately, someone that has survived childhood sexual abuse. If they don't know about your retreats, I love that on the website they can see hopeful stories of people that have
focus
overcome.
on the hope.
Yeah, because it does change a person. But when they see there's a bridge and there's others that have walked ahead.
And there are people who would do this for them.
Right.
Because they matter.
They matter. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be together again next week on Women of Worth Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here.